Hey, welcome to Wise Up on Air. So exciting to be here for a little physics hands-on. Fired up to get this started. Thanks for tuning in and joining us in the chat. All right, woohoo. So welcome. My name is Damian Kaspar. I'm a software product manager here at Audiokinetic. And today we're going to go deep into physics. So if you've got questions, you're looking for all the details and ins and outs of objects colliding with surfaces, we are going to bring you the deep dirt nitty gritty of it and expose you to some of the cool aspects of the Strata Multitrack physics collection. It's going to be awesome. We're going to go hands-on across Reaper, Wwise, and Unreal with special guest Chase Steele. We got a ton of stuff to cover here, including that hands-on and a bunch of updates that we have in the pipeline for y'all out there working with Strata. But with that, I want to just welcome Chase Steele to Wise Up on Air. Chase, great to have you.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's so good to see you. You've done just a ton of work to help surface Strata and the different multi-track collections that we've released over the last year. And you're here at Audiokinetic working alongside of us as we're continuing to advocate for this multi-track library. What's that been like? How's that going?
It's been pretty awesome, honestly. It's I started talking with Simon Pressey about, I think it was like just last June, so June 2022. And so since then, I've been kind of making these collection videos, and then it started my role started to kind of turn into something a little bit more because I kind of was very interested in seeing Strata succeed, and I feel like it's a really good. It's really good for the way that we look at developing libraries as sound designers. I think it creates a framework that there really wasn't anything like that out there before. So so part of when I make these the monthly videos that I'm sure some people have seen, and my process of doing that, when I started doing it, I wanted to make sure that I was demonstrating how you get, or the benefits of getting the sounds from one of the collection projects, and how seamless the workflow is if you're trying to get things into Wise or if you're working on a game. So when I started doing this, I was sort of having to relearn a little bit in Unreal. So every video that I make is also a demonstration of me probably learning new things along the way. And this one was definitely a really interesting learning opportunity to get to play around with physics and just do some things that I never really had time to do before.
Yeah, and there's just a ton to know out there. And so what kind of background were you coming at this from as you started to explore the interactive side more and more?
Yeah, so I have been teaching audio production for the last 7 years. That was sort of my primary focus, and I would take on contract work as a sound designer, here and there when it was something that was interesting to me. But I not always, it was not always game related. In the past, I had been working more on like strictly game related things. So it's like I can't believe it's actually 10 years ago, but I did when I finished school at Full Sail, I worked on Madden 15 and
Yeah.
15 through 17. So mostly that was on helping the dialogue implementation process. So coming at this, or looking at like the physics collection in specific, there was like a list of things that I wanted to do before I even really looked at what material was in the project, and so I sort of conceptualized, what I was going to demonstrate, and everything that I kind of had in mind that I was going to need to do a demonstration. It's all in here, so it's pretty extensive. So there's not, instead of, I guess, trying to think of a way to explain this. I feel like a lot of times when you want to practice or you want to learn or get better on the implementation side of things, it always seems like a struggle to like you have to go and collect the sounds that you're going to need, and it's so with this it's like you if your interest is more in the implementation side, this gives you an opportunity to have the sounds that are like ready to go, they're going to fit, and then you can go to town being creative inside of Wise or inside of the game engine you're working in.
Yeah, there's so many different layers of creativity that you have opportunities with, right? There's the sound design side that we're going to look at in Reaper using Strata Physics. There's the implementation side in Wise, which we're going to dig into and get some perspective on how to set that kind of thing up. And then there's the engine side, which I know we're going to dig into, uh, you know, flexing some of those objects in Unreal and really just cover all the bases, because like you say, is if you can get some of those pieces out of the way and unlock the creativity across those different areas, you get a speed up, you get more time to have fun.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I like was noticing normally when I'm playing around with, an idea or something inside of Wise, there's already there's so many knobs you can turn in there to change the way things sound. So it was really nice to just not have to battle against the actual source material. So it was like I didn't have to, other than tweaking some of the track settings. Once I had those good to go, I was hardly ever coming back in to re-import any additional sounds. So it was nice to actually focus on that part of the creativity.
Totally. Great. Well, let's jump in.
Sure. So everyone should be seeing my Reaper project window right now. So this is I won't spend too much time in here, but in case you haven't seen or maybe you don't know about the physics collection yet, the physics collection is one of the largest. Well, I think it may be the largest Strata collection to date. It's also it's totally exclusive to Strata, so the sounds that are in here, they're not going to be released anywhere else or anything like that. And I would say the value proposition of just this physics collection alone would be enough. Like after having used it, I can see this saving so much time that like this would be an instant win for me if I was looking at Strata to prospectively get a license or whatever. So back into the project, there's basically any material that you can think of in here. So I used ice in my project, partly because I chose to sort of focus on doing an ice demo because the actual chunks of ice were kind of irregularly shaped. And there was a lot of opportunity to, play with like different size in terms of these surfaces and objects that I have. And there's a lot of opportunity to play around with Impactor as well. So I'll show some of what I did in there. I don't know how easy it is to actually see like the names of the tracks in here or not, but there's anything from grass to gravel, ice, metal, different types of metal to hollow. There's not really a surface I can think of that's kind of not in here right now off the top of my head.
Right. And for folks who are not familiar with the way that we lay out our strata projects and sub projects, give us an overview of what we're looking at, because we're seeing the whole collection right now in a bird's eye view. And that's across tracks, across regions, across sub projects. So give us a kind of a tour of the Reaper interface so that we know what we're looking at.
Yeah, so if I zoom out a little bit, you can see this just turns into a
Rainbows.
big block of color here. So these are actually all represent markers for where the sub projects, because all these tracks essentially contain a sub project and then some previews of the sounds. So if I go to like the ice large surface here, so I can
Yeah.
click on that in my region marker manager. It's the easiest way to navigate these collections, I find. And then I can zoom in and have to go over here and find where it is. There it is. So there's the ice sub project, or at least one of them, the large one. So all the surfaces or objects have a large, medium, and small. And I can play some of this real quick.
Yeah.
All right, and I think that's. Let me see, what is this take here? This is the large impact sweetener. So now if I actually, you could, in theory, if you wanted to use these sounds that are already rendered out, you could use those. But when I go into the sub-project window by clicking on that track, now everything's broken down by layer, okay? So maybe I'll pull up, and again, one thing that I would recommend, even if you decide to go download the Strata, one of the free demos, you're going to want to probably have this region manager docked, because it makes it so much easier to navigate, and you sort of use it as a way to search these libraries. So maybe I was looking for destruction.
Nice.
Just type it in there, and then check this out. There's 14 takes of this destruction, and so most of these have quite a number of takes. So you're not really at a shortage of material.
Right. Well, and that's important for games because, we're always trying to increase the believability by adding variations so that you don't hear repetitions, right? The biggest immersion breaker is that repetition thing.
Yeah, and one thing I think I may have mentioned this a little bit, but working on the physics sounds this is really all a fairly new experience. I never really worked on. Well, I'll say I never really worked on to this extent. So once I started pulling things into Wwise and trying to make some of my props sound believable, I think maybe, and this is just my perspective, with certain things like physics, the user or the player is going to look at those and expect them to sound realistic, whereas other things don't always have to sound realistic.
Totally.
So I found that quite challenging to, but there's enough material here that you can really do it. So these are destruction sounds that I pulled open here, and I pulled this one open because, whoa, zoomed out a little too far there. You can there's actually a lot of different layers in this particular sound, so it makes for a good demo. So there's these base layers, which are usually like the initial impact or something, and then all of your debris is here. And then there's a sub layer. And if you wanted to, you could mute these, or you could spend time actually adjusting the mix levels, of course. I didn't really spend too much time doing that. I did a lot of my creative work inside of Wwise, actually, but outside of a few minor adjustments, changing volume levels and whatnot. And then there's some looping sounds here. So if we were gonna, go into the roll sounds, or maybe there's not roll in this project.
Reaping, I think, is a good place.
Yeah. So scrape. So all the loops have a start and end sound, and then the actual loop itself as well.
And that's great because you can bounce those starts and stops separately. You can transition in Wwise to a loop, randomizing those starts, randomizing the loops, and really get granular with the playback on the Wwise side of things, so that when it is in the game and you're rolling a rock around or pushing a table across a surface, that you get those unique startups, those unique loops that again, towards that believability.
Yeah, absolutely. So from here, let's take it into Wwise. So if I am browsing through my physics collection, I'm like, oh, perfect, these destruction sounds, these are what I want. I want to use these for my ice block inside of Unreal. What you would do, I mean, you don't have to use Wwise, but we do have a nice extension that will take whatever regions you have selected over here, and it will you can sync it up to your Wise project and pull it into a folder or a random container or whatever you want. So I'll do it. I'm not actually gonna. These sounds are actually in my project already, but just so you can see how easy it actually is.
Yeah, and we've gone deep on Rewise in previous Wise Up on Air hands-ons. You know, talking about the process of getting your stuff set up, and the Strata collections come with all of these extensions to help get you into Wise as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're, I think I actually have a video that I did when Rewise first came out. So if
Great.
anyone's out there listening and they want to see how this works a little bit more, you can check that out on the Audiokinetic YouTube page and help you figure out some of the settings and how it comes together later.
We got a link to that dropping into the chat as we speak. So folks that need to jump out after this and dig in deeper, links are flowing. Thank you for that.
This folder, I could change that if I wanted it to be something different. But since I'm not actually going to use these, I already have them in there. I'll just show transferring them. So I transfer. And of course, it's saying that I already have them in there. So I would increment the file names and close that. And now when I go over to Wise, should see, where is it? Did it not go?
Ta-da.
Doesn't look like it's there.
Aha.
Let me try syncing that up again. Oh, you know what? I bet it's because I'm connected. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't like that. Hopefully that doesn't break my project somehow.
Nah, you're okay.
Now it's gonna work though. That was my fault.
Hey, these are great stumbling blocks to stumble through together because they happen to all of us.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of that going on behind the scenes before I put this demo together for everybody. So there's the folder of my large ice chunks. Let me reconnect to Unreal. Now, like I said, I already pulled these same sounds in here, so we can just pretend like we made the random containers. They're already there for me. So I guess let's see here. Maybe I'll just talk about how I have my project set up on a bird's eye sort of level.
Yeah.
So I have a few different materials that I pulled things in from. So I have concrete, I have ice, metal, rock, and then some wood, which I really only used for there's a debris in one of the dumpster objects. But the one I spent the most time sort of tuning and wanted to use for the demo is the ice. So there's the most for me to actually show inside of that. But real quick before I even talk about that, one thing that's another really nice feature is this new script that is out. So I have this installed already, but let's say that I come back to this project a few weeks from now and I'm looking at my, let's see, let me find one that makes sense. These hits, yeah. So let's say I have these ice hits right here, or maybe I'll do concrete. So if I want to know where that came from, like which Reaper project, because maybe I have dozens of different variations of the concrete project. Maybe I've iterated and created my own versions. There's a nice little command that's added with this new Reaper script. I can go in, right click on this, and at the bottom, if you can even see it, it says
Yeah.
open associated Reaper project. So if I decide later, oh, I need more of this material because I brought in 5 of these impacts, right? So maybe I want to go grab the other 9 impacts that are probably in there. I go open associated Reaper project, and now if they go back over, there it is. So there's where it is,
Beautiful.
and I could go and it even pulls me up to where it is inside of the project. So I didn't even have to find the impact inside of the region manager.
Yeah, that's tremendous work from the folks who are continually improving this pipeline between Reaper and Wwise. So nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could go impact, what are these? Impact hard. And if I wanted to grab, if I want some more in there, I could just again do a little Wwise, and I don't want to mess anything up too much, but I could select that container and then sync it up, and then I could just pull the rest of those in. So super seamless workflow between Wwise and these Strata projects. So if you're using Wwise, you could even just be like barely scratching the surface of using Strata in your workflow, and it's going to save you time. It's pretty wild.
Cool. Thanks for showing that off.
Yeah. So now, I guess we can talk a little bit about the project specifically. So I have breaks, collisions, and then like hits or impacts for the projectile that comes out of the Unreal weapon first-person project. So one thing that I did, we'll look at ice specifically, is I have the ice set up in a switch container here. And it's the way that the switch is activated is based on, it's getting I can pull the event open. It's going to get, here's the switch. So collection size. So it's going to get the mass from Unreal of whatever the actor is. So I have a threshold where basically if the mass is over, I think it's like somewhere around like 65 or something like that, then it'll switch over to the next size material. So it'll go from small ice material to large ice material, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's what that switch is about. And then inside the switch container is 2 instances of Impactor. Okay. And I could probably go to my mixer. I should be able to play these and hear them. So here's I'll turn up the volume a little bit too. So here's the ice impact small. So now, of course, there's an RTPCs also connected to this. So I don't know where it's set right now, but I have an RTPC for velocity and mass. Maybe I can go in that. Let's see.
Great, and we're looking at the Impactor source plugin, which is an optional download when you install Wwise, and it gives you the access to this experimental plugin along with a sample project that you can use to audition the content. So you've added some new content to Impactor, and another part of that is being able to manipulate the properties of Impactor using things like mass and velocity. Looks great.
Yeah. So I won't spend all day looking at every single one of these little guys, but using the mass and velocity, you can do quite a bit. There's some interesting things that were I found particularly useful for the ice, which is the position randomization. Again, the ice chunks that are part of my material, they're so irregular in shape. So when they're moving around, without Impactor, it was a little bit difficult to get it believable. But this random position thing and the roughness and some of these randomization parameters were like, they really send it home for this. So I think that's kind of a good overview of the project. Any questions about about anything going on in here? Or maybe there's something I should cover that I'm not talking about?
Folks, definitely drop your questions into the chat and we'll weave them into this live stream. Uh, again, you've done a great job of carrying us from the variations that are available in the Strata Physics collection into Wwise and setting it up, the different sizes, how you've added additional randomization by leveraging the Impactor plugin, that position parameter. And again, like there's just a ton of flexibility with that plugin to add the kind of dynamics through game parameters as well as randomizing those different properties that are available in Impactor. Like you said, getting closer to that believability, not hearing the repeats, the restarts, and especially for something, as we'll see when we get to Unreal, that breaks apart in a million tiny pieces. You really want to have that that dialed in and sounding good.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I guess I can go over to Unreal now and we can actually see what I'm talking about in terms of what this ice thing is. So I am still kind of tuning this a little bit. So there's probably some more limiting or there's something going on. So we might have some weird sound stuff, but I think I'm going to demonstrate creating a new material anyway. So that will be something, so you can see my whole process of how this is implemented. I'll go in here and just click play. So let's see if it feels like I'm getting some hitchiness in my Unreal project right now, but let's see if it will behave. Okay, I'm still connected. So you're going to hear several different things. So there's going to be the ice impacts for the large or small components when they're all hitting each other, which there we go. I just shot it by mistake, but
Nice.
I was going to wait and shoot that in a second. So there's those two, like just the actual physical individual components colliding. And then there's the initial break from the gun. So you can kind of hear me doing that. Yeah, it's not, when I'm switching between windows, it's really not liking it right now.
Ooh, yeah. A little laggy.
Yeah. So there's that. And then there's also, I have an additional sweetener, which is, I think it's this one right here. I'll go ahead and solo it. Hang on. So it's
Ooh,
quieter.
yeah.
I can turn that up a little bit temporarily. So it also has a relatively low probability because there's all these other things going on, but every once in a while you get one of those. If I do this again, it might be more apparent.
Yeah.
Right?
That sounds
So there's
awesome.
that. And then I can solo the other ones as well.
It's
So
a
let's
great
do
way to
that.
audition it.
Yeah. Let's solo. Here's just the large ones. So if I'm just shooting the large pieces. Unreal's just lagging a little bit, so apologies for that. Let me try closing it and then replaying. Do that. There we go. Okay, so this is just the large ones. Right?
Cool. And you're using the probability in Wwise to reduce the number of times that it plays back on a gigantic explosion like that.
Yeah, I think the probability is set somewhere around like 15 or something like that.
Got it.
And then I also, before the event can even, hang on a second, before it can even fire, there is, zoom in. So I have a filter based on the velocity and the mass. So I have the mass set to, if the mass isn't over 50, it's not even gonna, there's not gonna there's no going to be no event, and the velocity is also set to like 110 right now. So um, the thing is, like, these individual pieces by themselves, they're going to get, once we have the impact in there, it gets, they kind of are just augmenting the 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 actual action of what the player is doing. So if I put it back in, let's see if we can get a better idea. All right, so again, there's not much you can do about the lag right there, but
Sure.
at least it's sounding better than it did before we started, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think one thing
Cool.
that's important to break out here, right, is that you've created a physics orchestration, right?
Yeah.
From the object itself, you get just a ton of different physics collisions. You get the initial breaking of the object. You have all these places you can attach an event in order to play back a sound. But then you start to filter and you start to limit the number of sounds for all those events because there's a ton of them happening, right?
Yeah.
And
In
so,
this case, yeah.
yeah, and so you're showing the filtering in the blueprint to prevent too many events happening if it's, if the size is not big enough or if the speed is not fast enough. And then even further down in on the Wwise side of things, you have those opportunities to limit the number of times something plays either through the probability, like as you mentioned, that you're using, and the limiting of instances either globally or per game object.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, I only used the large and small impact and collision, all the material that's in the Strata project. I only used the large and small. There's also a medium. And another thing that is, I didn't point this out yet, but there's also for each size, there's also hard, medium, and or is it hard, medium, and soft, I think, or light, hard, medium, and light. So you can actually, I'm using the RTPCs to
Yeah.
kind of change the intensity, or how loud, or how intense the impact is. But I could pull in way more sounds. There's you could really do this all the way to whatever extent you want. And so so my demonstration is there's still, I could still go, more. I could still do more.
Right. Right.
But
Because you could break down each of those sizes into sub sizes, and wow.
yeah, it was kind of a lot to get my head around. I'm like, because at first I thought, oh, I'll use them all, and then once I started pulling them in, I'm like, this is a lot. I don't know if I'm not gonna be able to tune all this for just a quick demo.
Yeah,
So
well, and there's a ton of fidelity baked into the simulation that you've authored here, right? You've already gone a long way towards, leveraging just part of that content in a believable way with this very complex ice situation. Um, let's look at the different pieces in Unreal because you mentioned there's one that's on break. We've got um, the shattering sound.
sure.
And then we've got the individual impact. So show us the high level of where you're making those calls.
Okay, cool. So what I have is I'm also using, so the actual materials inside of here. So these ice blocks. So what I did was I started with just a basic shape. So here's a cube, and I can show this, and that way I can actually use it.
Great.
So I go into fracture, and this was, by the way, I had to learn all about this fracture menu and all these, how to actually work with this, because I couldn't find any good assets that were already made for me. So I also learned about this while I was doing the demo.
Cool.
if I want to do something simple like a uniform fracture, I can go in and, oh, I have to create a new, make a new geometry collection for this.
Right.
So we'll call it, let's call it Wise Up Demo. That'll work for now.
Beauty.
Okay, and then now I can, I'm not gonna, not doing a tutorial on the fracture system, but I'm gonna go ahead and fracture it using the uniform.
Awesome.
One thing, this is probably if someone watches this and they decide they're gonna go play around similarly. It took me a while to find this, but there are some really tiny pieces that can sometimes get created, and what you can do is you can just use tiny geometry to try to merge some of those.
Got it.
Looks like this one ended up okay, but that was helpful in trying to filter out what is going to make a sound and what isn't. Cleaning that up makes a difference. So there's that. I have the geometry collection ready. Let me just turn this off. Okay, back here. And let's see. Oh, hang on. I don't think that's supposed to look like that. Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
I think it would go back when I press play anyway, but so there's the material. So I have these materials attached to basically a blueprint. So if I were to go over here, and we're actually going to use that one, I have sort of like a template set up for creating these. So inside the blueprint, I'm using the on chaos physics collision. So the chaos system is part of, that's part of Unreal. So that's what that is. It's basically coming from where that the impact field is, and it's looking at the little components of the ice or whatever the material is they're breaking off, and how they're what they're hitting in the environment, if they're hitting each other, that sort of thing. So when that happens, that's basically what is triggering the chain of events. So what it'll do is, before it triggers the events, it's going through these branches that basically determine if the material is triggering it, if it's large enough or small enough to actually generate an event. And then it'll go through, there's also velocity. So if it's moving too slowly, or if it's, above a certain value, then it's probably just going to end up being noise and causing some issues. Now all these, so the actual blueprint here, this is all feeding into another blueprint I created just for functions. So if I go over here, that's where this is, the physics chaos collision sounds. And all that's really going on here is I have it set up that based on the surfaces that I defined in the game, it'll trigger the appropriate collision sound, so that I don't have to, every time I make a blueprint, I don't have to like set this up all over again. Just feed it into that that custom event.
And very simply, it's looking for surfaces. It's listening for these interactions from the physics system, and then playing those sounds back at the right place with the right parameters.
Right, exactly. So it looks like there's a lot going on here, but it's just because, I'm dealing with all the different materials that are that could be in the project.
Yeah.
So that then they post their event at the location that they're needed. So I'll go back to, here's the, here it is, the new one I made. So this doesn't have any geometry set up for it yet. So I go in here and I can find, actually what I should do is, well, no, it'll be all right. I'll do like this. So here's the collection I made right there. And save that. And then depending on what these materials are, so these are already set up, I think, for, this should be the ice material. Yeah, okay. So I open the material and I can verify that by looking at this here. It says physics material.
Great.
I guess I should check the other one just in case. Okay. So that should be good. That should basically mean that everything in here is going to just work automatically. Oh, hang on. Switch back. Okay, here. So let's see. If I compile this, let me see. I shouldn't have to change anything because it's still based on ice. I just basically changed the geometry that we're using. So the one other thing I didn't look at this before, but for the initial for the break event that occurs, so not the actual collision of the pieces, but the break when it happens, there's also an ice hit that gets played there as well.
Great,
So
and that's your chance to kind of play the hero sound or the
right.
you know, up front. The thing happened, and we're gonna start you know, the concatenation of physics sounds based on these impacts, and yeah, so it's a chance to really punctuate the moment of breaking.
Yeah. So let's see if I go over here. I don't technically need this anymore because that's just the geometry collection by itself. So I can get rid of that and should be able to take this directly. So there we go. You can see now it's got the ice material on there.
Ooh.
And this one will probably play back better than the big wall that I had there.
Right on.
All right, let's see what happens. Will it make sound? Let's see.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So it's doing all the things it's supposed to do. Maybe I could just, I'll go over here and I'll solo some things again just so we can be sure we're hearing it all. I might have to, let me make a few copies here.
Great. You make it look easy.
Well, I'm glad it looks easy. All right, let's do another one.
And now we've
That's
got
just
the
the large.
got it.
And I could probably just I'll go ahead and make that louder while we're soloing it. Right? So
Yeah,
every
cool.
now and then you get some of that. And then let's see. Small. I know I soloed these earlier, but since we're kind of coming back around to it.
Yeah.
Looks like these aren't actually small enough. So maybe what I could do is if I wanted, because those walls have much more variation in the size. What I could probably do is go in here and then my collision size, I could probably make it so that the smaller ones are actually able to get through.
Sure.
Just to see what happens. Why not? So this is where, I have the blueprint, and this is where I would start tuning things based on what the actual prop is itself. It's still not small enough.
Yeah, and again, are there properties in the blueprint that you're filtering out?
It's possible. It's possible there. Let's see. Small. If I make...
And thus the creative dance of technical sound
velocity.
design and physics.
Yeah, we're doing it
begins.
live here.
Yeah.
Maybe this here will change things. 20. Change that. I placed a few of these guns around, but maybe I should put more. It still doesn't like it.
I mean, those are big chunks comparatively.
Yeah, they're still pretty big.
Yeah.
Maybe I could. Huh. Interesting. let me just check and see if it's something
Sure.
else, if they work on here or not. Yeah, so we're getting some there.
Yeah. Yeah, some fidelity to work out on the new block. And again, like those chunks look bigger than the stuff that comes off the giant columns. So
Yeah, and you know what? To the benefit of how I actually put these blueprints together, if this was actually, like if there's supposed to be these different variations of these blocks in the game, maybe I don't want these to make the small sounds at all. So maybe my design worked out, except for purposes of a demonstration.
yeah.
Uh,
So can we take a peek? You're connected to the game. What's the profiler look like over there on the Wwise side of things?
Go in
What do we
here.
see over there when one of those walls comes down or the tiny blocks get
Let's
impacted?
check it out.
Cool.
Well, you know what? We haven't even. I forgot about my dumpsters over here.
Oh, cool.
Let's hit those. These are actually. I actually really like how this came out, and it was probably the least amount of effort that I spent. So now these have some wood pieces in there too. Or I mean, it's supposed to be wood. Again, I was sort of limited with the models I had available,
Sure.
but I like these big chunks here. They sound pretty good when
Oh,
they get
that's
hit.
great.
And we might be hearing a little bit of concrete, and I think that's just because the floor is set up as one of the materials, and I just forgot to change it to a different material.
But that's
So
that's common. You're going to have that
yeah,
object to surface interaction and oftentimes be playing, multiple sounds for an impact.
yeah. Here, I'll hit one more, and then we'll go to the profile. Right. So there's
Great.
sort of
So in the voice monitor,
check
we can
that out.
see the different amplitudes of the different metal impacts and concrete impacts.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in there. It's probably just some limiting and things I have to do, that was probably one of the things when I was putting this demo together. It was like sort of my last step is just sort of optimizing and seeing,
Yeah.
okay, how many of these sounds are actually playing. But so you can see so I think there's some events that I ended up not using anymore. So
Sure.
you're getting some errors there, but
Yep. We got the destruction events you can see there
yeah,
when the impact or when the destruction starts.
yep,
That's rad.
yeah, man. So let's see what else. Is there any questions or anything in the chat? I mean, I
Got
think
some feedback that it's a great looking switch system and sounding good out there. For folks who are still tuned in, drop your questions in and we'll weave them through. But this high level overview of what's at stake from a content to implementation and then game engine side of a physics object, it's just been a really smooth overview of this exploration. And yeah, like a person could really get lost in any part of this, wherever the geek is at, right? If you're really into the sound design side of things, the physics collection gives you all of the tracks, all of the EQs, all of the layers and effects. So you can get lost in that for days, or can, like you showed, just bounce that and get on to the next piece. Same thing on the Wwise side of thing. You can start with a switch system, tie that into parameters, and you're off to the races. You can also take that extra step into the Impactor plugin and now start working with more dynamism and more randomization across those different properties. And jumping further into the game engine side, as you showed, creating those objects, the dynamic fracturing system that comes out of the box with Unreal, and then all of the controls that you have to filter the amount of events or the events that are sent to Wwise. It's just a lot of places to experiment with all of these different aspects of implementation and dynamic sound, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If I was doing, I could say this now after having, learned a lot about the physics system in Unreal and using the physics Strata collection. I don't think I would want to. I would. I would. Uh, I would have a hard time not, or I'd have a hard time doing a physics related design project without this Strata collection. It helps that much, saves that much time. That yeah, I think it's just it gave me an opportunity to actually look at things inside of Wwise and these blueprints that I wouldn't have time to tweak. So that, I guess, in essence, that's my overall impression of the collection. Is that it's a great learning tool, and it makes everything else that much more inspiring to try to play with.
Totally. And like you said, you're just scratching the surface of what's in the collection and what you've carried all the way to the game and the physics simulation, right? You've got all those additional layers of fidelity with sizing, with speed. And we haven't even talked about scrapes, rolls, sliding,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And, in my time working in games, like physics was just such a magical box of, you know, fun. Like destruction is simulated destruction is fun.
Yeah, it helps you. Yeah, you get to do it without actually doing it, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
totally. All
yeah,
right. Good to see little Skeets in the chat. And Dave Kahlberg, great to have you here along for the ride with us today. Well, fantastic. What about other surfaces in the physics collection? Like, can we put our ears on
sure.
something else? Just going
Yeah, yeah,
back to
yeah,
the collection itself. I'd love to hear another example. We've been dug in on ice here. Burr,
yeah.
it's cold,
Yeah,
but
I need that because I'm in Florida.
uh,
Yeah, it helps me to feel a little bit better when I'm sitting up here in the heat.
fair. Not a bad virtual reality to be living in.
Sure.
But what else? What else can we put our ears on in there? I know that some of that metal groaning impacts that we talked about actually on the Strata Physics Collection Inception live stream with Tristan Horton and Simon Pressey and the Boom folks was, that groaning metal stuff was really cool sounding.
Yeah, let's see. There's a lot of metal stuff. Let's see which one. I don't recall which specific project it was in, but maybe Impact, Metal Massive.
Ooh,
That sounds like
massive.
it's gonna be.
Yeah,
That sounds like it has to be something that we want to hear, right?
cool.
I just gotta find the actual.
Where the
There it
good
is.
stuff is. Yeah,
Let's get in there.
awesome. Well, and Florian from Boom had a ton of great insight into the process that Boom uses to carry that content from the field into Reaper and prepare it for this multi-track collection. They've been such a great partner for us in creating this content that is unique to the physics collection for Strata. It's been great to have them working with us towards this.
Yeah, I mean,
Metal
it's I
massive
can't even.
large bend, Simon
Is
Pressey
that
says.
is so? I am in the right project then.
Yeah.
Large bend, bend. Is this what we're looking
Oh, yeah. Oh, that stuff's great.
Here's the medium one. And then slow. If you really want to slow it. Yeah, these are pretty cool.
So when we think about physics and the natural inclination, I think, is to go right for the sound of destruction, impacts, and other aspects. But there's this other part of it that is like the creaking hull of a giant ship, or in one game I worked on, it was getting the rotational velocity of a metal pole that had a swinging arm on it, and using the rotational velocity, how fast it rotated on that pole, to fire off tiny little squeak sounds, or groaning metal at that physics interaction. And this is another level of physics that the Strata library really speaks to with regards to these bends and this groaning metal. It's a fantastic collection for that.
Yeah, definitely. And every time I go into one of these, I didn't even, that wasn't a sound that I had actually even heard before. So there's still stuff I'm, kind of listening through and finding. But it is actually, in consideration of the fact that there's so much in here, it's not that hard to, you know, you can very quickly understand the structure of things. Like you automatically see there's large, medium, and small surfaces. You can see what the material is. So things are laid out with this amount of material very clearly, to where you get familiar with, what sort of variations you're going to get. There's a really consistent structure to each of the sub projects, so you can kind of expect, okay, there's going to be a roll sound in here.
Yeah.
So you
What
can
about
kind of intuitively find them.
Yeah, that's great. Back to the master project. If we're looking at bends specifically, like we've dug into metal, but what other surfaces do we have that are exploiting these unique blends?
Maybe rock.
Yeah, Eamon says real treasure hunters here, finding the good stuff in these collections. Yeah, yeah. So what
I
else do
think
we
there's
have bending
some.
in there?
I wonder if is there a tree or is it wood? I think I like the way these wood ones sounded, so I'm gonna
Oh
pull that
yeah.
open. Let's see what we have inside here. Bend. Yes, we got some bends. This is probably gonna sound cool, I would
All right.
guess. Let's see. Slow. Right, and we can also kind of see what's like what these. There's two different layers for these loops. There's a weight layer and then a custom layer. And then also these start and stops are nice.
Yeah.
So you could even even if you weren't going to use the loops, these are pretty cool sounds on their own. You could grab those without
Totally.
the rest.
There was a great storytelling moment in the Strata Physics Collection Inception live stream where Tristan was talking about, what he did to capture some of these longer duration loops for bends and otherwise. Folks dig back into that live stream to hear more about how we created those bends, and that the juxtaposition between the weight layer and the designed layer, right? I think again, there's just a ton to understand with regards to creating sounds for these kind of physics interactions. And he exposes some really cool tricks towards getting this content. And of course, There it is. Cool. I love it. What about you got a favorite surface outside of wood and
Let's
ice?
see. Let's see. The water, that one's pretty cool too.
Okay, tell me
Because
about that.
honestly, when I first opened up the collection, I kind of, for some reason, I didn't expect to find water in there. I don't know. It just seemed like, I don't know. It seemed like, it seemed like surely there can't be water too. I don't know. It seems like a category in and of itself because it can get, especially the implementation with that can be, you're gonna definitely have some like looping and stuff going on. But let me find, where is it?
That's cool. And you know, there's just
There
a
we go.
for me a really clear overlap between something like the physics collection and the footsteps collection, right? It's like
Yeah.
if you think of footsteps as a physical event that happens between your foot and surfaces, you know, it's not so different than an impact, and yet there we have so many different surfaces over in footsteps as well that you really have just a ton of content for those kind of interactions.
Yeah, same with the like with some of the like maybe something like the sci-fi weapons collection.
Yeah,
Like you could, you know, between those two things, you know, that whole aspect of your project, you can pretty much, you know, go ahead and start putting it into the game like right away, and everything you need is going to be there. Uh, this is interesting. The water in the water large surface collection. There's some scrapes in here, so I'm trying to see what a water scrape sounds like.
awesome.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Cool.
And then there's like different sweeteners. And this is the large one. So maybe I think I've shown a lot of the large ones. What if I go to, let's go to water small surface. See what the contrast between the two of
Ooh.
these might be. Okay.
That's great.
And then why not? Let's check out the medium one too.
All right, Dave, thanks for joining us today. Good to have you here.
I'm fumbling around in the in Reaper a little bit because this is the not the setup I use in my like this is some of my commands and things are not in here, so bear with me.
You're doing great.
There we go. I found in a lot of cases if it's, you know, if you're a little bit overwhelmed between the different size of surfaces, you can usually go with a medium and easily, you know, using like some of the stuff that I was doing in Impactor and all that, you can go either way with the mediums if you're kind of pressed for time, or if you don't, you know, if you don't want to go that deep, you
Sure.
can, you know, these mediums are they serve as like, oh, it's medium, so I guess the name implies, and it lives up to it.
Well, and for medium, you're also able to pitch up or down a
Yeah.
little bit in either direction and still preserve a lot of the what's there, what makes it special, and so that feels like a safe bet.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the stuff that I used ended up actually like what I started with was like the medium ones for the ice, for example.
Yeah,
And then once I got my system tuned to where it sounded good, and then I was like, okay, now let's bring in another size. That way you're, you know, you're working off of one, and then you're kind of increasing the complexity without having to turn all the knobs like right from the start.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes
What
total
else?
sense. Cool. And again, I'm hearing those water loops and bends as, equally valid in a system with physics as it would be in like making a boat simulator, pushing out the rowboat, or whatever the scenario is. I'm wading through water. There's just a ton of applications for those longer form water samples.
Yeah, yeah. And uh, here's sand. This is an interesting one. So there's light, medium, and hard also, just to get an idea of that. And the same thing can be said with the like the different intensities for each size. If you go with a medium, start there and then bring in the hard or light to your system as you feel like it benefits it, maybe.
Great. Can you zoom in on that medium for a second?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And what kind of layering do we have
Yeah.
there?
Let's see if I can make this just a little bit bigger. So we have the base layer, which is going to be just that.
Nice.
And it looks like there's also some details. And the sub.
Great.
Now,
Yes. So what I love about this is that if it's too thumpy for you, take out the base layer, take out the sub layer, and now you've got something that's more like, it's a little more ephemeral. It can fall anywhere without that huge aspect of it, and it's just as easy as muting those other layers and rendering the track.
yeah. And, again, when I was using Wwise, whatever you have muted, it's going to, when it transfers it, like it just respects that whole process of how you have things set up in here. And it's not like, you just don't have to spend a crazy amount of time trying to tweak things and then, okay, you get back over to the game. It can be very, very simple to get up and running. So
Yeah.
it's really cool stuff.
Excellent. What about rolling? We got a question coming in from the chat. How about rolls?
Yeah, let's see.
Back up to
There
the.
weren't any in there, but maybe does metal have rolls? We did listen. Maybe we didn't listen to the metal rolls. Yes, there's a roll.
Wow.
I like this one's really cool actually. Yeah, that's good. A lot of them do have, like you'll see some will have roll, some won't. But for the most part, you can expect there's going to be at least one or two different types of looping sounds for a lot of these projects.
That's great. Tristan was
See,
talking about leveraging a turntable that he set a 50-pound barbell weight on so that he could, spin it and have some velocity to it while he was dragging different objects across to get these consistent loops and rolling sounds. So, as part of those rolls, is there the acceleration and deceleration? Do we see that at the beginning of those?
let's see. Roll.
And great questions. Thanks for these.
What was it we were trying to find?
Yeah,
there?
an acceleration or deceleration. It does sound like it is a smooth transition into that loop.
Yeah, let's see. Let me hear just the loop by itself here, maybe. So the start. Yeah, there's some kind of envelope things going on here with that.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely a lot of these starting loop sounds. They're sometimes that's really hard to get right. The start sound to mesh with the loop. Here it's really very seamless.
Hmm.
Let's see. There's probably some really nice roll sounds in the rock collection. Back up
And
here
again,
to
we're
it.
treasure hunting inside of these collections, looking for the
Sometimes,
the gold.
yeah, sometimes I find, especially with this one, if I don't know the exact name of what it is, I'll type in just .rpp in the main project window, and then it'll, you know, make it. I'll still have to scroll through, but you're not looking at all the rendered takes as well. So
Yeah.
rock. Wonder what about plant medium? Let's see what that's about. Didn't really dive into the plant too much. See
Uh,
if there's any rolling plants. Is that a thing?
maybe.
There's bends. Plant destruction. Somebody was having fun there for sure. You can't
Totally.
destroy plants and not have fun.
Yeah.
uh,
Those bending examples of plants, it's like I'm imagining, your character is running through the jungle. There's maybe some kind of deformation happening on the foliage as they move through it, and you're tying those different loops at different speeds to the character so that you get the sound of the plants as they're moving swiftly through the jungle. It's just made for games in that way.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the biggest thing. If you still haven't, if you haven't tried it, any of these Strata collections yet, get the free one. Um, it's really with that goal in mind. A lot of libraries that exist now are not exactly gonna have in mind the implementation process. So this is just like a lot of it's a lot of work that's just done ahead of time for you. And then the thing that is really nice is once let's say I had put all in place all my different physics objects in my project and I'm happy with it, and now I want to embellish it. You can come in and actually see uh, sometimes the source name is a little bit more telling than other times, but you can see like what the prop was it was recorded, and it's all in the UCS format. So I can see this one isn't. It's fairly evident what it is already, but you could, by listening to some of these layers, you could come up with ideas if you wanted to, get your own recordings, or if you wanted to just try to make it pop out. Then you're kind of adding on top of what's already there instead of having to, you know, work from the ground up at that. And ultimately, you're going to end up with something that sounds better, and you probably will have more fun with the creative process since you don't have to worry about if it exists or not.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, a question coming in from the chat about vehicle wheel rolling content. Uh, you know, I don't think we've got car tire in this collection as its own thing, but many of these rolling and bending loops could be repurposed for car tire surface interaction. So maybe not the car tire itself, but certainly for the surface side of that could be interesting.
Yeah, and I think I don't recall what all is in the vehicles collection, but there's if I had to guess, there's probably something in the vehicles collection, or probably something that's planned to come out that's going to cover that. Um,
Right. So let me take a quick break and point folks at the Strata collection online. You can get there at audiokinetic.com, products, Strata, and from there you can get some free samples. We have 2 sample packs out. You can explore all of the collections. And part of that is a sample of our vehicles collection. So dig into that one and see if maybe there's an opportunity for you. In the chat, yeah, you might need your own content for sure, but there's a great collection that might be able to supplement that or save you from having to head out into the desert to get a certain surface or otherwise. Free Strata Sample 2 came out last month, includes the sci-fi weapons collection that Chase mentioned. Again, a subset of that collection is available as part of a free sample, along with those footsteps. So again, dig into some of those surfaces and impacts that a foot and foot type can have. Sign up. Get Strata News delivered directly to you and get started with these free samples as soon as you can. I'll mention Wwise again. That comes as part of the download when you get the free samples. It comes with Wwise and I believe the IEM plugin suite along with Enrage. Is that correct, Chase?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Awesome. So updates to Wwise recently, just always making it better for folks to be able to get their content over from Reaper into Wise. Along with that, new open in associated Reaper project tools that we've provided to be able to get from Wise back to Reaper. And so a fantastic suite that we will continue to work towards.
Yeah, one thing so that open associated Reaper project, I mean, we're showing it with the Strata collections, but that just so that everybody knows it doesn't matter if it's a Strata collection or not. It will open if your file came from a Reaper project and it's one of your projects, it'll open that too. As long as it has the metadata in it to do that.
Great. That's fantastic. And then I'll just mention again the physics collection Inception, kind of a behind the scenes of the physics collection recordings, how they came to be, why they're such an important piece of a game audio workflow and pipeline. Really, as Chase has illustrated here time and time again, gets you into the fun stuff faster and gets you off to authoring it in engine in your game. So some great insights on that live stream. Again, thanks to Florian, Tristan, and Simon for joining me in that adventure. So Chase, fantastic to have you here today and digging deep into the Strata Physics collection.
Yeah, it was fun. I'm glad I get to kind of show more of my experimentation. I try to show some of it in the collection overview videos, but usually those are more focused on the material of the project itself. So it's nice to actually get some more life out of my experiment.
Well, yeah, and I think we all benefit from seeing your process all the way from Strata to the game and the simulation. So thank you for bringing that to us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me in here.
Yeah, it was super fun. Super fun. All right. Well, great. To folks who joined us in the chat, thanks again for your questions and being a part of this live stream where we've unpacked some of the cool pieces in the Strata Physics collection. And we'll see you next time on Wise Up on Air.
Take care.